Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Happy Monday, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us today for part 3 in the Memory of series, where we have Glenn sharing the story of his wife, Kerensa. Over the last 2 weeks, we got to meet Kerensa, the whimsical, funny, and brilliant young woman who was diagnosed with hormone-positive breast cancer at the age of 22. After hearing the love story of boyfriend and girlfriend to fiancé and eventually husband and wife, Glenn and Kerensa experienced cancer progression. In this episode, we share the realities of stage 4 breast cancer. This episode isn't for the light of heart, and it's not sugar-coated. Stage 4 cancer for Kerensa progressed quickly. She was in substantial pain, and she chose to fly home to the West Coast to be near her immediate family in an effort to protect Glenn from seeing her pass away. I'd like to take a minute to read you a couple passages when I was doing my own research on stage 4 breast cancer that I'd like to share with you all. And I'm going to read them because I think they are articulated very nicely. The first coming from ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. It is important to remember that breast cancer is treatable at any stage. Treatments for metastatic breast cancer are continually improving and have been proven to help people with metastatic cancer live longer and a better quality of life. Coming from the Fred Hutch organization, they mention metastatic breast cancer, also referred to as stage 4 breast cancer, means the cancer has metastasized or traveled through the bloodstream or the lymph system to create tumors in the liver, lungs, brain, bones, or other parts of the body. Between 20 and 30% of women with early stage breast cancer go on to develop metastatic disease. While treatable, metastatic breast cancer cannot be cured. The 5-year survival rate for stage 4 breast cancer is about 22%. The median survival is 3 years. Annually, the disease takes 40,000 lives. As with primary breast cancer, treatment for stage 4 breast cancer includes chemotherapy or radiation and can often be harsh and unforgiving. But dealing with an incurable disease and the side effects of its treatment aren't the only burden metastatic breast cancer patients have to bear. Many also have to educate others about their disease, explaining over and over that no, the scans and blood tests and treatments will never come to an end. No, the metastatic breast cancer in the lungs is neither lung cancer nor linked to smoking. No, staying positive and fighting hard isn't going to beat back this late-stage disease. Welcome to the conversation. My burning question right now is, I'm on tamoxifen. I thought I would be in, no evidence of disease. How did this come back? How was I resistant to this treatment?
That was questions that we asked and didn't really get. It was just, we don't know because you're so young and it was so aggressive that it shouldn't have come back this soon, but it did. And it was more like, all right, it did. We can ask why and everything.
Right.
Until we're purple in the face, but it didn't matter at that point. The only thing that mattered was, how can we treat this? What are the options? What is the life expectancy? What is, all of these options here? Like, let's
move forward.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Everything's coming out new so much. So let's try to get 2 years and then see what happens. And, we're really doing this. And this chemo that we're going to be on is showing great promise. And it's 2 years new. And, people have shown progression free for 24 months and it's been great. Like, awesome. Mm-hmm. Like, we got this. So went home and new normal. Here we go again. But we got this.
Yeah.
Her pain was a little bit higher. More MRIs and scans showed that she had some small compression fractures in her spine. So it was like, all right, don't be bending over and picking things up anymore. So that was changing. So more pain. So here's some pain meds to try to help you do this. And she hated being on the pain medication because, again, it made her tired. So she had to time it where I take the long acting now And then when I get to work, I can take the short acting because, oh yeah, she didn't want to stop working. I can take the short acting, but only half a dose. So I'm not too tired, so I can still work. And then I leave at, she actually agreed to cut it down to half days at this point. Yeah. So I can leave and then come home and take it and then nap and then be okay for the evening. So from there, we're home and things were kind of normal. We told the people that we had to tell, like, it's back. Her parents were devastated, and her mom called me and said, we're surprising a trip. All of us are coming out there. So her mother, her stepfather, and her 3 younger brothers, who are about the same ages as our boys. Okay. So at the time, there was a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, her brothers, 12, 10, and I want to say 6. And now, so my boys had seen them on Skype because we're like, hey, we're all the same age. You can play, PlayStation together online. And so they were excited. We get to meet. Okay, great. Like, are they our cousins? Like, technically, they're your uncles. But.
Right. They're family.
Yeah. Like, they can be cousins. So that was the plan. Like, all right, great. A few days, she started not feeling well. And, like, just a cold. And then there was one day she couldn't catch her breath. I'm like, let's go to urgent care. Like, this isn't good. So we went to urgent care, and they took a listen, and they're like, get to the ER. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Get to the ER now. You have pneumonia.
Wow.
So it was something that she contracted while in the ER the week before, which is super common, but suppressed immune system. And
absolutely. Yeah, so, you're so susceptible.
Yeah, back on the oncology floor. So I remember she got wheeled up from the ER, and I saw one of the nurses kind of nudge another one and point over. And just kind of like, oh no, like a look of like, not like how I told you, won that bet, but more of a like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so she got,
you never want to see them back, right?
Yeah. I mean, a week went by since she was discharged. So she was in a different room, like next door. And she was joking. She's like, oh, I like the other room better. Is it my room available? And so it got bad. I mean, her oxygen level, she was on constant oxygen. So at one point it got up to 4 liters, and she just couldn't breathe. She couldn't really talk. She was on a lot of pain meds. They're trying to get that, but because her breathing was so low, at one point there was a night where I thought I heard the death rattle. She just couldn't breathe, and it was congested, and that awful, awful sound. And I looked at her and her oxygen, she's not really breathing. And I grabbed a nurse, and she had this like slight respiratory depression at that point because just the meds all at once and trying to get her to breathe normally. And so they adjusted her, and she ended up being fine. But that whole week I would stay up at night and just listen and make sure she was breathing. And, there were like 3 nights where I really thought, this is it. I'm going to lose her. Was
that part of the discussion at all? It sounds like this happened so rapidly. I could barely wrap my head around this. I know this is the first time I'm hearing this story. I know this is the first time our listeners are hearing this story. So it went from Thanksgiving and, Black Friday shopping to checking yourself in to the hospital with pain, abdominal pain, to stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
And now pneumonia and respiratory.
Yeah, it was just overwhelming, and we had no idea what we were doing. Just, it was survival mode at that point. And her family was coming out, and she was in the hospital. Like, we don't know when you're going to be able to go home. She said, I'm going home for my family to be there. They're flying out here from Washington. I'm going to be home. Like, we don't think you should. She's like, I'm going to be home. Send me home with oxygen. So she was very strong-willed when she wanted something. So they're like, all right, it's against our orders, but we understand. And so they sent her home.
And the concern was just because of her low oxygen levels?
Yeah. And she just wasn't really getting better. So they sent her home. We got the house set up for oxygen. And so her parents and brothers flew out, and they were staying at a hotel, which was down the street from us. But of course, we have them at the house.
Yeah.
So they came over, and of course, the second day that she's there with the oxygen, there's a storm, and we lose power.
Oh God.
So now she needs this oxygen. Luckily, there was a place that had portable tanks down the street, so get that organized. As I'm out there getting all the tanks, oh, guess what? Power's back. Good. We have the tanks. We're okay still. And then she started recovering. And as her brothers were there and her mom and stepdad were there, she started getting better. And then
amazing.
Again, her mom's a nurse, so she was watching her. And one of my hobbies became like putting the portable pulse oximeter on her finger just to see what's your oxygen today.
Sure.
She's like, oh, it's this. So she got better and then off the oxygen.
Wow.
Within like 3 days or so.
Really?
So it was great. And her brothers and stepdad flew back home, and her mom stayed for a few extra days to make sure she was okay. And she made a full recovery from pneumonia.
Unbelievable.
It was like, all right, like this is a sign. This is something. I mean,
Yeah.
if this isn't going to bring hope, then I don't know what is. Yeah, there's some progression. So let's switch, let's get you off tamoxifen and switch chemos and put you on a aromatase inhibitor and Lupron. Let's get you on the Lupron shots. It got better.
Wow.
So it regressed. All of her blood markers or tumor markers were decreasing.
Oh my gosh.
It was working. Like, this is incredible. I'm like, we are doing this. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I knew it. Like, you're
against
amazing.
all the odds, like
Exactly.
you're doing it.
Like, this is going to work. We are absolutely going to, like, cancer doesn't have a chance against you. Like, we got this. To backtrack a little, when she told her company that, it reoccurred, they're like, what can we do? What can we do? And so they arranged her and I and the kids to have floor seats at a Celtics game. Because she was a ginormous Celtics fan.
Wow, really?
She's a transplant here. She loved basketball, and her and her mom had season tickets to the Seattle Storm WNBA league out in Washington when she was younger. And of course, Seattle lost their Supersonics team. Mm-hmm. So she just kind of became a giant Celtics fan. And we would always watch the games, and the kids would really laugh at her because she would really get into it. She would yell at the players on the TV and, come on, coach, come on, Brad, put me in. And, he needs me there to tell him what to do. So it was really funny. The kids learned some new colorful words. One of the things that the kids still bring up, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but there was one time during a playoff game where it was a very close game and they won at the buzzer, and she was just like yelling and jumping and like chest bumping, and it was just hilarious. And they're like, that was the best night ever. It was 10 o'clock at night, so it was overtime. It was great. But yeah, so we got to go to that, and there's a picture of us on the garden floor and on the logo, and it's my background. It's like one of my kids' backgrounds. It's just a great experience. That's amazing. We got to do, and she was just blown away. The tumor marker started growing again. Like, all right, let's watch this to see what's going on. And they kept growing. And trying to get my timelines. So we celebrated our year anniversary. And she was feeling okay. And then in September, I think it was, end of August, she went in for a scan, and they just wanted to do scans.
Yeah, because they go like every 3 months or so.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And they wanted to do a brain scan, just because it's a newer thought that they had of people with advanced stage breast cancer where brain metastases is common. And so they did a brain scan and brought us back to another room. It's like, we found a large tumor in your brain. Devastated.
So, okay, no symptoms.
No symptoms.
You see like the tumor markers kind of increasing, but we already know it's in like the pelvis and the spine.
Yep.
And for some reason, the oncologist had like this hunch of like, let's just get a baseline or just check it out. Okay.
Yeah. And it started to show some spots in her lungs.
Okay.
Like, so it was progressing enough. And they said, let's just check. So there's tumors in your brain. Like, we're going to have to do radiation, whole brain radiation. A couple of days go by. They're like, we're not doing whole brain radiation. Those were just a collection of blood cells. It's not a tumor. So there was some confusion on it. So like, don't worry about that.
You can't scare a cancer patient that.
Right. So
oh,
then we like, okay, good. Phew.
Right.
You can breathe. So then more scans happened later in the month on her spine, and there was a tumor that was growing in her spinal column, and it was pressing on her spinal cord. So they were afraid if it grew too big, then it could be paralysis. So she needed radiation again. So she had five to seven radiation treatments, and these ones were more painful than the last ones and just knocked her out. And while she was on radiation, you can't take chemo because it just makes it more powerful and they can't really control it. So now she's off chemo. And then she ended up with a kidney infection after that. So no more chemo because, she has a fever. So that was September. Starts getting better. And that was early October, I'm sorry. Like October 4th.
When you have radiation on your back, because I only know it with regards to radiation for the chest, is it similar in the sense that you're still putting like the lotions and the creams on it to prevent as much burning as possible?
Yep.
And so when you're saying that like it might have been more painful for her, is it because of the location of where it was or the intensity?
It was more of the feeling in the bone, not necessarily on the skin.
Got it. Okay.
So it was that interior pain that she would feel, felt like somebody was just crushing her bone. And we found at that point there were more compression fractures. So she had 4 at some point from almost the base of her neck down to her tailbone. And at this point, the cancer had spread to her tailbone, to her hips, her pelvis, some in her femur, her ribs. So it just, it spread. So in October, we knew that was spreading and like, all right, what can we do to get this back under control? Because she was off chemo for about a month. And at that, during that time, the cancer just had a party and spread unbelievable. It's just so aggressive. It was hormone receptive. And even though she was in medically induced or chemically induced menopause, it was still being 25. She's still producing hormones that, they were trying to stop, but it was just thriving in her body. So October 20th, she was having a bad back pain day, and we have this heating pad, which worked wonders for the whole time. And so I heated it up and I'm trying to get it under her back, and she's laying on her back. So I'm pushing down on the mattress to slide it in. And as my hand went in, my knuckles brushed against her right side of her lower back. And I felt a pop, and she felt a pop and screamed. I'd never heard her scream like that before. She thought she broke her back. She couldn't move. Her legs weren't moving. We had to call an ambulance. They came up, put her on the stretcher, wheeled her out. That was the last time she was in our house. So went back to the hospital on the oncology floor and saw all the same doctors that we saw just 10 months earlier. And they said, you may never walk again. So the antibiotic that she was on for her kidney infection has a tendency in rare cases to cause tendon rupture. She ruptured 3 muscles in her lower back and her hip. And they're like, you're not going to be able to walk. And in true Kerensa fashion, she's, yeah, I will. So she would work at it. For 5 days, she couldn't get out of bed. And she would try, and it was just too painful. So during that time, she had more scans, and they saw that it's just getting worse. Her blood counts wouldn't stabilize. They realized that even after blood transfusions, she was anemic, and her platelets were dropping rapidly. So after 2 weeks in the hospital on November 1st, they told her that there's nothing more they can do. And we had talked before of when it got to that point, she would move back to Washington to be with her brothers, her mom, and all of her family out there. So they said, if you're going to move back to Washington, now's the chance to do it. So the hospital was great. They made all the arrangements for her to fly, and an ambulance trip to the hospital, and then from the airport in Washington to her mom's house, her parents' house. So that's...
And she was stable enough to fly.
She was.
In terms of like pain and everything, though?
So during that, she switched pain medications, and it seemed to get it under control. Made her a little loopy at times, but it got it under control, and she was able to walk again. So short distances.
Girl.
So
Awesome.
she just said, watch this. And she did it, and the physical therapist was impressed. The doctors were impressed, and she just kept her humor during this whole thing, too. Everybody loved her. She got lucky and had this corner room at the hospital, had this great view of sunsets. So, we had a date night, one of the 2 days before she left, we had a date night where we got, takeout and watched a movie. Actually, we watched the Great British Baking Show. But,
oh, yeah.
So on November 9th, the cabulance picked her up at 3 a.m. and drove her to the at the airport, and got to spend the last couple hours there with her, and then she was wheeled on the plane, and that was the last time I saw her.
How was the choice to not go to Washington with her?
The decision was for her to go out there, get settled, and then I would fly out and spend time there, and then come back and fly out, come back. So we didn't know how long she'd be there for, or how long, of course, the biggest hope was, there'd be, an oncology team up there that may have seen something. So she had an oncologist, she had doctor's appointments, and they're like, there's nothing. And at that point it was all in her bones, everywhere. Liver was just the worst part of it. Her lungs were even worse. And then it eventually moved to her brain. So, and then the medication that she was on was too much for her. So there's no more chemo because of the platelet count was too low. So while she was out there, I was able to talk to her infrequently because she just wasn't herself anymore. There were moments where she was, and we would talk, and it was great. And then there were moments where she just wasn't her. We would video chat when we could, and she would know who I was. And there was the time, it was it was around December 3rd. Yes, December 3rd, where we video chatted, and it would just be, random whenever she could. And so she called me, and I was driving, so I just pulled over, and I'm taking this video call, and I was talking to her, and she was herself. She called me the nickname she would always call me. She was her, and it was great. And I was talking to her and like threw out some inside jokes that we had, and she picked up on them. And I had written her a few poems that I read to her, and she, responded how I would expect her to respond. I'm like, all right, this is my Kerensa. She's back. Yeah. And it was great. And then, the next day wasn't as good of a day. And then the Thursday, that very next Thursday, I got a call from her. And at that point, she was using her mother's phone because she would get too frustrated. Her fine motor skills had deteriorated. So she couldn't really text, and it would just be all over the place. And so, to protect, and she'd get frustrated. So to protect that, her mother's like, let me know and I will help you with this. So she called me, and she was really emotional.
Kerensa was?
Kerensa was.
Okay.
Just really, let me go back about a week. She was told that we're taking you off active treatment, and we're going to just put you on hospice. There's nothing you can do. It's spreading so much. So that was, I think, the Saturday before the Tuesday I talked to her. So, okay, this is happening. They're like, but if your platelets go too low, then we can take you off hospice and give you the platelets so you don't bleed out and have a painful, time. So talked to her that Thursday, and she was in pain, and she was crying and just distraught. So I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, I can't. I'm in so much pain. I can't do this. I'm so sorry. I was like, listen, you're strong. You got this. I'm not strong. It's like, you are. Like, you're doing this perfectly. What can you expect? she's like, I'm not strong. I'm not. And she just kept saying it. She kept apologizing. It's like, you don't have to apologize. You're doing amazing. It's like, everybody knows how strong you are. She's like, no, I don't feel it. I'm like, well, I want everybody to know, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows. I'm like, it's okay. And I just kept telling her it's okay, and I'd be okay. And then I promised her I would keep her legacy.
Amazing to be able to hear such a beautiful yet tragic love story. I think a lot of times we don't shed light on stage 4. There is a lot of misnomers and misunderstanding about what a cancer diagnosis is, regardless of what stage you are. We are always living in fear that it might return. There's so much that oncologists and researchers and investigators are doing to understand something that is incredibly complex and individualized. I love what you said earlier about not dwelling on the why me, or what could I have done better, or what did I not do, but to look ahead and to look forward to everything that is coming out of this. And that is just so commemorable. And I really thank you for sharing this story up until this point at 3:14 and 3:15. And letting our listeners hear and travel this journey with you of opening up your story and your hearts for us to meet Kerensa, and then at the same time fall in love with her humor, her love for purple and not pink, her joy de vie, her strength of not complaining, which I think sometimes as caregivers or friends or listeners, we just kind of want them to. We want them to cry and bawl and let us hold them because we know how hard it is. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing this incredible, moving story.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to be here and to have a good space to talk about her.
Great. Thank you all for tuning in again this week. It was great to have you, and I hope you appreciated the realities of these conversations we've been having, especially as we remember Kerensa. If there are any of you out there who have a story you would like to share, or would like to share a story in memory of someone, please feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to capture your voice, your story, and your words on Breast Cancer Conversations. You can email me at laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Until next time.